Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. Today on Sky News, Tom Bradshaw, the head of the National Farmers Union, with every single word he said, he was saying that Brexit is bad for UK farmers and for the security of our food supply, and yet when asked directly, he still supported Brexit.
The human impacts of this policy, the impacts on food production for the future, on investment in our domestic food production.
The focus, therefore, was on this change in the inheritance tax rules as it relates to farms. Do you sit here today with any hope that they will listen to your concerns and U-turn or not?
I still believe that they have to.
The inheritance tax on farmers is part of the Labour government increasing taxes by £40 billion, which they say they need in order to pay for all the stuff they want to do for the country. How much do you think Brexit is costing the UK government in tax revenue? £40 billion. So mathematically, if not for Brexit, the reason for taxing the inheritance of farmers would disappear.
I've read that you're passionate about the way in which the sort of handouts under the Common Agricultural Policy under the EU given to growing food have changed in nature since the last government introduced the transition plan.
If you go back 10 years, we were given an area-based payment that effectively underwrote food production and the risk that we have within our businesses. That has dramatically changed. There's nothing underpinning the risk of food production anymore.
So losing the money that the EU was paying to farmers isn't just hurting farmers, it's also hurting the security of the British public's food supply. Okay, carry on.
When you think about import standards, that's an area where the government really could say, you know what, we're going to have a level playing field for our farmers, our food producers in this country. We're going to stop the import of products which would be illegal for farmers to produce here, but expect us to have to compete with them. The last government did some very bad trade deals. There's a real opportunity here for this government to say, we're going to stop this and we're going to make sure UK farming is on a level playing field. The Australian and New Zealand trade deals mean that we are facing competition from those markets. I accept they're 12,000 kilometres away, but the way that meat is produced over there wouldn't meet our standards of production. And so, yet we have to compete with those standards of production.
So because of Brexit, we're now doing trade deals with countries that have lower standards of food production, which is putting farmers in the UK out of business. So you see how everything that the head of the National Farmers Union has complained about on TV today is a direct result of Brexit. And yet when he's asked directly...
You prefer us to still be in the EU and have all the rules and restrictions associated with that?
I'm a big believer we don't look backwards. The decision was now made 8 years ago that we were leaving the EU.
This dude just spent 10 minutes saying that the effects of Brexit have been absolutely devastating for the UK farming industry, but he can't answer when asked directly, has Brexit been bad for the UK farming industry? Do you see how this is an ideological sickness?
We have to make that relationship work. We have to look at how we mitigate the impacts of the trading relationship, maximise the value of that trade.
What he's talking about there is that it's now harder and more expensive to buy and sell between the UK and the EU because Brexit created trade barriers, meaning that products that cross between the UK and the EU have to be checked. There's expensive paperwork. And that's because the UK and the EU, as a fundamental consequence of Brexit, no longer follow the same rules. So the only way to fix that trading relationship, which is what he's saying, is to have the UK and the EU following the same rules. But he then goes on to say,
but also, we can't be a rule taker with no ability to influence those rules. And that's the real danger with dynamic alignment.
Okay, so you want us to have the same rules as the EU, but you want to make sure that any rules that we follow, we had a hand in writing. You don't want us to be a rule taker. What you're describing is us following the same rules as the EU and also having a seat at the table within the EU's decision-making bodies. That would be a member of the EU. And you can't say that the reason you don't want to talk about Brexit is because you don't want to look back when you're also talking about us being a rule taker, not a rule maker, because that's fundamentally a question of sovereignty, taking back control, the core propaganda of the 2016 referendum campaign. Now, I am fully down to support the farmers' argument that if they are taxed inheritance on their land, many of them will have to sell their land in order to pay the tax, and they'll sell it to corporations who won't necessarily farm the land in the same way, which will damage our food supplies. But farmers need to understand the political landscape that they are operating in. Nigel Farage is set to be our next Prime Minister. His party is currently topping the polls, and the strongest argument against Nigel Farage, so the best chance that we have of stopping that from happening, is the fact that Nigel Farage's pet project, Brexit, that he pushed for 27 years, has damaged every part of the United Kingdom. So by refusing to explicitly say that Nigel Farage's pet project, Brexit, has damaged British farming, you are giving Nigel Farage cover and allowing him to cosplay as a champion of British farming, while effectively supporting a policy that you know is damaging your entire industry. Brexit is a sickness. Please take the cure. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.